All right. Moving onward. Okay, town manager report.
Good evening. I'm going to start with shedding some light on where we stand with the Francis Avenue issues. We had received a preliminary report from the police department's traffic division, and then they took all of the feedback from last meeting and came up with a list of options. We've spoken with the business owner. I have had some email communications with some of the residents. I know that some of the counselors have had meetings with some of the neighbors, and I think at this point we need to come up with a time and a place to actually review this list. Quickly, they offer several options, which I think we really need community buy-in, as well as to evaluate business impact. The important thing to note is that this street is only 25 feet wide. So the police in general do not think that it's wide enough for parking on both sides, although to date there has been an ability to manage the flow. Residential permit parking, similar to the system that is in place at Powder Hollow State Park, which would involve area resident-only parking passes, is one option. Alternately marking the northern side of the roadway, which is most visible to vehicles coming down Francis Avenue looking to park, with no parking Thursday through Sunday, 10 to midnight, would be another option. Marking one side of the street as no parking, and do the same on surrounding streets, because we know if you can't park on Francis or Highland, you're just going to find someplace else. A couple of other small suggestions were rejected as not feasible in terms of the state traffic manual of uniform traffic. There was a zoning assessment, and in fact, we can look more into the history of the permitting, but the Jimmy's Pub, upon the renovation, actually lost seating based on, I believe it was the removal of a wall, whereas if they had increased tabletop capacity, that would have been linked specifically to some of their parking requirements. So we think that we're clear on that. We could have some directed patrols that are not specifically DUI patrols in order to ensure traffic flow. And if there are traffic violations, those are enforceable. So we have to know that all of that is in play. They did review the recent drunk driving offense that happened into a stationary vehicle. They could not come up with the conclusion that it was attributed to the parking concerns, but they do acknowledge that unfortunately, people do run off the road, lose control with an unfortunate degree of regularity, and this is a concern based on the size of the road. The last option is the option to monitor the situation, which may not appeal to area residents who are seeking immediate relief. It is also somewhat likely that the increased traffic in the area will wane over time. Consideration may be given to monitoring. So we do have a menu option with some details. I'm paraphrasing some of them, that we can now present to the neighborhood and to the businesses in the area. And we can continue to look for collaboration and alternative parking solutions. So at this time, I'll just let the town council know that I will be reaching out to all of the people who have emailed me, those who have participated here. And what we have been doing with issues of concern in certain neighborhoods is just sending a letter to everybody in the concerned areas, informing them. We've done that for the Hazardville Memorial School, for some of the other building projects, and it gives them an opportunity to know who to call, a phone number, email, and then they can make a decision about whether they can attend and have all the information at their fingertips. So that will be the next step for this week, now that we have this revised list based on everything that happened at the last meeting. I will also ask the traffic division to again review this meeting so that they can gather any more information so that we can keep this as an ongoing and fluid conversation. So again, we'll look for a meeting place, we'll look for a date, and we will inform the council of that date and time for anyone who is interested in attending and meeting with the residents and the business owners. The other issue the nonprofit grant process through ARPA is about to kick off. We're just really looking at some of the final pieces in order to mesh it with the requirements as spelled out by the Department of Treasury. As was mentioned earlier, the small business grant program runs through November 18th. So we are looking to stagger the small business one to end as the nonprofit one is beginning. We will have all of that information on the ARPA page that is on the town's website. We are also going to be bringing forward the Senior Tax Relief Committee because we need to have them start looking at options in time for the budget process, because those two pieces are going to dovetail with whatever relief is recommended to you to incorporate into the budget process needs to be budgeted. So that committee should be meeting shortly. And for those of you who might have seen it, Ellington just recently adopted their policy. That was in one of the local newspapers this past week. So there's a lot of communities that are looking at these options, and so we're going to get started on that as well. A friendly reminder that there are a lot of subcommittee meetings that need to meet. We only have one scheduled to date, and that is Leisure Services for next Tuesday. So for those of you who serve on these multiple committees, when we do ask for dates and times, we have many items pending. We would really appreciate it if you could get back to us with your availability so that we can schedule those and keep those items moving forward. We're trying to run a lot of these through subcommittees and then bring them to the full town council agenda. In terms of the Ramblers, this has been a long-standing concern with the turf and track improvements because of where those trailers were located, as well as their somewhat deteriorated condition and their non-use. So that actually has been resolved, I think, as early as this morning. The trailers were removed out of the construction site. Several of them are being brought to Mount Carmel, who has graciously given permission to allow those to be stored there. The last two that I think have been moved out of the construction site area do need to be towed. I believe Public Works is making those arrangements, but I will confer with you, Councilor Nelson, if they actually need some help doing that. We've had some issues with timing-wise with this. There's a lot of material in these trailers, so it's been a little bit of difficulty to get that done. I do believe, and I will ask if Steve remembers, I do believe that the Ramblers, we have set up the annex as their new permanent home with additional electrical service and everything that they're going to need, as well as these trailers that are going to be relocated there in case they want to do concessions, whereas the high school field is going to be reserved for the high school at this point. But they are not being displaced. They will have a home, and that is where they're currently playing. The farmers market is, a very difficult issue. We have 20 dates for the summer portion of the market. That works out to $5 a Sunday for people who are coming. From a fiscally responsible standpoint, we had a very difficult budget process. We have a lot of obligations. We have a lot of quality of life issues. Most markets do charge. We are moving to the indoor market at the beginning of next month. There is no charge for that market. So over the 27 market days that we offer, weather permitting, it works out to less than $5 if they choose to do that. We are open to suggestions, but in general, I think that with COVID waning, this has definitely affected the market. The market, from what I understand prior to my arriving here, was the place to be because there was really not a lot of other activities during COVID. So it was a wonderful gathering point for the community where you could actually get fresh food and mingle and everything. I think some of that has eroded because obviously we're out of restrictions. I will say that it is difficult to call it a farmer's market when we only have one farmer. We are actually probably in violation of the state agricultural farmer market rules, and it is, there's notes in the file from a few years ago that we actually, the town of Enfield, paid a farmer to be present at a farmer's market in order to make that bare minimum of what is required by the state, which I believe is 2 farmers. There are costs associated with the farmer's market. There is the coordinator cost, there are insurance costs, there are public works costs, there are site costs. So again, I think it's probably a conversation for the off-season to decide how best to bolster the market, how best to position some of our local farmers and vendors for success at this market. But I also think that it is the job of my office to be cognizant of those costs. So I do have some ideas. I also think from a marketing standpoint, we could be doing more. And I also think that every once in a while you need to do a gut check about your date, your times, your locations, who your competitors are, why are farmers going to other markets on Sundays and not ours, and really kind of cast a wider net. We've heard from a lot of vendors, not just about the fee, but about general dissatisfaction with various items. So we have to be consistent. We have to have a good marketing strategy. We have to have good locations. We have to have good signage. All of this really speaks to enhancing what is a wonderful community asset. We are not accepting SNAP benefits. So from a food desert standpoint, where it's hard for people to access fresh food, we also don't honor those benefits, which is a difficult process to achieve, but it is achievable. But we haven't done that here. I think that sometimes there's just new ideas that need to be brought in, and we were hoping to have a vendor meeting at the end of the season so that we could get feedback in addition to the ones that we've been emailed. If anybody would like to see some of those emails, I'd be happy to share them with you. So that is in terms of what we're doing there. The market manager does have access to town hall, so if there is anybody who needs a handicap bathroom, there should be no reason that they're not able to access the ground floor of the town hall. And in terms of some of the questions that were asked tonight, I can speak quickly to the fact that ARPA funds are, I think I mentioned last week or 2 weeks ago, they are allowed for anything that is to help disadvantaged households, which is why you voted successfully to give $10,000 to the Department of Social Services last month. Cindy Guerreri is able to portion out funds in order to, A, help disadvantaged households stay in their homes, stay in their apartments, maybe do fuel, security deposits, anything that is needed, because we want to really not allow people to have to be homeless or, frankly, be displaced due to financial issues. So any of those fuel requests, in addition to the traditional fuel bank resources, would go through the Department of Social Services, and people could avail themselves of that. The JFK issue, I'm sorry that Mr. Daigle left, because we met last week to go over the budget, and he did a really great job of explaining to me where we sit with that project. But I did want to mention that he also, one of the enhancements that came back online when they realized that they had the money to do so is enhanced security and cameras throughout the entire school. So that is something that is going to be very state-of-the-art. We are still, at this point, working out a maintenance plan, because when you have an improved asset, obviously the biggest piece is keeping it in the condition that it is. So we're working on that. The bleachers at JFK, I believe, are coming in. They're going to be there, as well as, I believe, on the softball field. We will look into the trash and maintenance and barrels for people who are using the fields. That's an easy one. And we also questioned, based on the available surplus, if whether one of those bathroom facilities could be placed in the centerpiece of where all those fields intersect, in order to prevent people from having to travel all the way back and possibly not having access to the school. So Mr. Daigle was going to look at what the cost of a water line and what one of those prefab bathrooms might be in order to enhance that area as well. And I'm going to end on a very positive note. We were notified this week that the Regional Health District has received a $300,000 opioid abuse prevention grant, which is going to be used in order to really support increased prevention activities. As the mayor mentioned, we have some high numbers. We have a significant amount of overdoses. We've had some deaths, and we've had a lot of Narcan administration, which points to some underlying issues that I would like to have a conversation about with some of our regional neighbors, as well as some of our agencies here in town that are providing services. So this $300,000 is going to go a long way to implementing what some of those policies could be, which I think are definitely a priority for the community. In terms of the sidewalks that Councilor Nelson asked about, we did inquire with our Public Works Director at our weekly meeting last week. Those are sidewalks that were replaced with asphalt at some point. He did mention that they could be replaced, as could miles of other sidewalks in town that are showing signs of condition and wear. So it would just be a matter of sending this either through the Public Works Subcommittee, or possibly, if you think it's a safety issue in terms of anything else Public Works as well as Public Safety in order to get that through and attach a funding source to it. So if you'd like to make that motion, we can add that to the next Public Works subcommittee.
I'd like to make a motion to add. I'd like to make a motion to add it to the next Public Works subcommittee.
Second. Yeah, I have a question. So discussion on the motion.
Yeah, go ahead,
So I wanted to.
Councilor.
Before we talk about doing any more sidewalks, I want to make sure we're clear that the ones at Abbey Road were part of the $30 million referendum. Every communication I've seen, I saw it include. So before we start, again, I'm all for fixing sidewalks. I just want to be clear that those are part of the referendum, which if you go back online on our website, it's clear the question and answer were included. I know there was some back and forth whether they're clearly part of that $30 million. So for me, I want to make sure that that's rectified before we start spending money on other sidewalks because the voters voted on that.
So there is a difference of opinion on that, but what we've decided to do in terms of the referendum 2021 is that project has moved down a little bit so we can accumulate any cost savings on the other projects and fund it without having to worry about
Because it's on there, so
Right.
I'm just saying, I know there's some difference of opinion, but it's on our website and it's clear that's what the voters voted on. So, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
And then just lastly, in terms of 1235 Enfield Street.
Motion, hold on, there's a
Oh.
motion, right, before, right?
Okay.
To put it
There's
on
a motion and a
DPW
second.
subcommittee.
Yeah, now we'll vote on it. All in favor? Unanimous?
Thank you.
Thank you.
And then just lastly, the 1235 Enfield Street pothole on Route 5? Okay, so we'll notify the state about that. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Jim, you have any report, Jim?
No, there's no report tonight.
Okay, all right, thank you. Excuse me,
Sorry, question for the manager for you before we move on. Yeah, sorry, one question.
just one.
I'll make it 1 point.
One. Okay, go ahead.
So through the mayor and manager, so with the drug symposium, asked about human trafficking, big deal. It's part, this is what, I know people want to get political here, but this is why the border being open, this stuff comes to town. Fentanyl's coming to town, and same with the human trafficking, and it needs to be, I think, in concert of all the things that are going on. If we're going to do this, it should be part of that. And also, we need to be upfront about pot's influence. I'm sorry, we can't just isolate drugs. Drugs are drugs, and we should be talking about it all. And folks want to sell pot in town, so these are all part of the decisions that need to be chatted about. Especially, and again, unfortunately, these overdoses are getting worse, not better. And it's not just opioids; it's fentanyl laced in a lot of drugs, heroin. So I know we're using opioids. Yes, it's still an issue, but it's gone beyond opioids. And unfortunately, if we're going to be having community conversations, we need to be honest about it. And why, again, allowing certain drugs to be sold now in town makes it worse for the issue we're dealing with, and with human trafficking. Again, these are things that we're seeing, and there is a direct impact when other things are happening in the country. They do come to Enfield. And I think that's what I'm saying. We need to do this. We're going to be, I'm all for it. But make sure we do it the right way and have all these open conversations so people realize, to your point, when maybe someone is doing something, recognizing some of the signs of human trafficking is as bad for me as drugs. I think it's a terrible thing. And I'm not saying there is in town. I hope it isn't. But I'm not naive either. Not naive. I'm just saying I don't know. I'm not. I don't know. I'm just saying. But these are all things I've asked twice about, and so if we're going to do this, I'd like to do it all at once. Okay. Thank you.
There were over
Welcome. Just hold on a minute, okay?
There were over 700 drug overdose deaths in our health district within the last year. So, we are the hub. There are a lot of issues in terms of highway access to Springfield, that are specific to Enfield that I think we have to deal with. But in terms of the police response, I think we also have to understand that there is a very active police presence and investigations in conjunction with the DEA and a bunch of other organizations and entities, and that happens in a lot of towns. There's a lot going on that we don't see on a daily basis, but that still, I think, speaks to the issue of conversations within the community. Getting people to get into recovery is very difficult. having people stay in recovery is even more difficult. And so I do believe that one of the roles of government is providing those types of supports through programs, additional funding like grants, in order to focus those resources here. I think we all know somebody, all our families have been touched with either opioid or drug crises, overdose deaths. We've had them here with people that work in this building. It's a very difficult situation. So it's incumbent upon us in terms of whatever local policies, local programs, outreach, advocacy that we do, that it's all wrapped up together. And I think that there's a lot of work to do.
Councilor Finger, and then we're going to be moving on. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. Through the Mayor to the town manager, did you just, I hear right that you're going to move the Ramblers over to the annex for me?
That is the plan, yes.
Okay, I'm just the plan. So that what do I call it, press box, is that going to be replaced? Because that was shut down, if I remember, some time back, because it's unsafe. It's very unusable. I mean, I've been in there. I spent a lot of years in that building, and I know that you go up on the third floor. I know it's kind of usable, but it was supposed to be not usable. I remember that because when I was a recruiter at Buildings and Grounds for many of years, we had to lock that up and shut it down because of the use. That's why the Ramblers moved out of there at one time to go to Enfield High. So I just want to make sure that that building is safe. You know what I mean? Because it was at a point to where it wasn't supposed to be used. So if they're going to be using it as a press box, like I said, I've been in that building 100 million times. I know what it's like. I've set up the sound system there many a times. I know what it takes to do that. I'm just saying is that we got to make sure that whoever goes in there is safe. Because when you walk up those stairs to go up, it's bad. And you know that. If you've been there, you know that stairs going up, it's bad. So just make sure it's safe. That's all I'm asking. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
You're welcome. Councilor Nelson.
Well, I guess we're hitting on some serious notes tonight. The drugs. I know firsthand. I lost my son last year because of drugs. The problem is a bunch of different problems, but the biggest one is Big Pharma. They're pushing a drug to offset heroin and fentanyl. And when these people can't get Suboxone, they go back to the heroin. It doesn't help them recover. The recovery places, they're open door. They want to just keep you coming back and coming back and coming back. And I know firsthand, recovery weakens the user to the point when they get out, they use again, they think they can do what they did, and they're dead. And it's happened again and again and again. So it needs to start with getting these people help, which is not substituting a legal drug where Big Pharma's making billions, but get them off the drugs completely. If it's 2 months of detox and it's hell for them, trust me, you'll be happy you did it, and you won't be in my situation for the rest of my life. But I would like to see that $300,000 go to educating people on the real causes here. And if we don't get the drugs out of their system, legal or illegal, they're gonna keep going back. Insurance pays for Suboxone, they lose their job, then they don't have insurance. What are they doing? Heroin's a lot cheaper than Suboxone, and fentanyl's even cheaper than that. So they're going to keep going back. And until we address the elephant in the room, and it's Big Pharma, nothing's going to change. They're making billions off of this while our family and kids are dying. I'm sorry.
Oh, you're right.
Thank you.
I'm sorry for your loss. I wasn't aware that you had an overdose death in your family. It's real and it's personal, and unfortunately there's so many levels of this, including Big Pharma. You've seen the small settlements that we've received as being part of those lawsuits against Big Pharma. They're pennies on the dollar in terms of the damage that it's done. The other issues are advocating at the state level in terms of available beds for treatment and the insurance regulations that surround someone getting into a treatment. You can get into a 7-day treatment program all day long. That does nothing. It's the programs that have 30 to 60 days, 90-day longevity where you start to see some progress. So it's a layered issue, and it's one that is going to take an entire unified bipartisan approach in order to make some serious dents in what the issues are here in town.
Okay, thank you very much.